Hello everyone, welcome to another Faces of Loki. Today we're focusing on the lover of Outcast aspect of Loki. This is not lover in the intimate relationship sense, although he can be that way as well, but lover, or rather ally of Outcast, as Loki tends to be. Um, so that's the aspect we're focusing on today. So, one of the keys here, if you notice, if you ever follow any of the pages online, Facebook especially, where they are focused on Loki, you'll see there are a lot of people, minorities, LGBTQ community especially, that seem to find a connection with Loki. Like he's very accepting of them. Whereas others, and this goes along with a lot of the Jotun folk, but whereas others, the Asir and even the Vanir to a point, even though they are more accepting than people portray them, a lot of their followers do still have a very Christianized view of right and wrong, a very toxic masculinity aspect that isn't necessarily part of the teachings, but just what they are, or what they're portrayed as. And so in the communities at large, there are those who still will use gods, etc., just like in any religion, as an excuse to hate or to tell people they're wrong for being who they are. Loki, on the other hand, is one that you don't see that so much. A lot of people expect him to be just naturally be accepting of outcast of some kind, especially in the LGBTQ plus community. He is one of us. He's also very, very accustomed to knowing what it's like to be outcast himself. So that is kind of what we're talking about here. So how is it that he's used to this? How is it he has experience with this? That's what we're looking at. For starters, we have the story of his children. His three so-called monster children. We have Fenrir, Big Wolf, Hela, divided, half living, half dead. Jormungandr, world serpent. These are his children, and they are feared and or hated because of how they're born, because of what, yes, the prophecies for Ragnarok, etc., came into play. Excuse me. But they were viewed as monsters, and so they were hated, and they were taken from their home as children because of that fear. Then they were put in these positions of it really is, if you were to look at it in context of storytelling and metaphor and allegory, you could view it as them being put into positions of being oppressed. Fenrir is tied down and chained up by trickery. Then you have Jormungandr, who is literally cast out into the sea, and Hela, of course, gets to spend all of her life taking care of the dead. Because she's not quite living, so she can't totally be here. So there's that element of oppression there. And again, it boils down to who they are and how they were born. Nothing they can help. It just is what it is. So Loki, as their father and or mother, can see that. He knows that. He also has the children, not only the so-called monster children, but there is Sleipnir. Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse, being fathered by the Jotun builder's big, powerful stallion, and Loki being the mother in this particular case, you sometimes wonder, what if Odin had not taken him as his steed? Would he have not been just as hated and feared, since he not only had the power and strength of his father, but the 8 legs and the swiftness and possibly even the craftiness of his mother, who was Loki? There was, some form of hatred pushed toward Loki for giving birth to begin with. And that shows up again in Locusena. And then on top of that, we also have the trolls or witches that are in the Ironwood, that are actually out otherwhere in the world as well, that came from after Loki ate the heart of Gold Egg. He gave birth to the witches or trolls, depending on which translation. They all kind of go together, trolldom being a form of magic. But the point being, all of these children, they were all hated or feared or both, simply because of who and what they are and how they were born. So what can we learn about Loki from all of this? So what I get from this, again, these are all my personal opinions, my UPG, based on my readings. Loki is a lover of Outcast, an ally for Outcast, because he is both father and mother of Outcast. His children were pretty much all Outcast, from the Aesir and Vanir, and so as a parent, he would be a good ally because he loves his children, and he is, the father of Outcasts, mother of Outcasts, so he knows what it's like to watch his children suffer simply because of how they were born. Then on top of that, again, he is an outcast himself. In the flighting, they mention the one thing over and over during the flighting, or the feast at Locusena, the one thing they mentioned over and over and over was that Loki had given birth like a woman. How unmanly he was. Well, we know Odin had lived as a woman, in his efforts to learn Cedar, and learning woman's magic. And they all knew he did that. They didn't bring that up at the feast. They didn't, shame him for doing so, there, at least in Asgard among the other gods. Because, well, you're not going to tell your leader that he's a sissy or whatever they wanted to call him, whatever terms people want to use these days. But the point they honed on was, you did this too. And Loki told him, well, you did woman things too, Odin. And so he kind of changed the subject. Odin stepped away from that topic, but the others didn't. And so the others go in and throw in the fact that Loki gave birth. That was the main thing. They were talking about him giving birth, and that was unmanly for him to do. Okay, well, you may say that's unmanly in the very physical sense if you were uh, to be talking about one specific reproductive system, but then you're also talking to a shapeshifter who was in female form when giving birth and becoming pregnant. Which, to me, in my eyes, shows Loki's not possibly gender fluid. Loki is not, um, you know, could be called that. He is. I say he because that's what he uses with me. And in the lore, he is referred to as he. But at the same time, multiple times, he's literally in a female form and giving birth. Then again, that is not what determines gender, and we know that now. So he himself was gender fluid, which is part of why the LGBTQ plus community can relate to him or feel comfortable with him. Like, he's not going to down me for something he himself is doing. Um, you know, so for Loki, he's an outcast in that sense. So he's an outcast and his children are. So he loves us. Those of us who are a little bit weird, a little bit not accepted, not normal, whatever the hell that is. But then we also learn, that on top of being gender fluid as this, he is not ashamed of it. The whole time that they're complaining during the flighting, well, you did this. It's literally their only argument the whole time up until, Frigg comes out and mentions, Boulder not being there anymore. Other than that, everyone keeps focusing on this one thing, and Loki's like, yeah, and so what? And then he points out things they did that actually were wrong. So he's not ashamed of it. And that shows us that he is an ally, that he's not only is he unashamed for himself, but he doesn't want us to be ashamed, and he will stand for what's right and stand for that equality. So that's why many of us love him and feel drawn to him. He understands what it's like. He is one of us. He stands up for himself. He stands up against, hate and hypocrisy. And that's kind of a part of who he is. And so he does help give this little bit of a push, an oomph of self-esteem for us that, we don't have to be ashamed. If it's okay for the gods, it's okay for me. In a way, why should I hate myself? Loki loves me. So that's one of the things. So then we throw in that his children, as we mentioned, were also hated and feared for simply, who they are and how they were born. And there you go. He knows. He knows what it's like. He's been there. He's watched his children go through it. And if we're totally honest, most of the Jotun can feel this on some level. Not just Loki. Loki is kind of, in my view, he's kind of like the god that is our connection to all the other Jotun. We have those that we do honor, Angrboda and Skathi and all these others that we do honor. But Loki is kind of our key to the Jotun world, in the lore anyway. And he kind of like opens the door for us to, see what the others may be like through his stories and his dealings with the other Jotun. So through that and the other stories, even without Loki, the Jotun know what it's like to be feared and hated simply for who and what you are, by birth. The builder of the wall. We go back to that story. Not just Loki and Sleipnir, but the builder himself, when he made the agreement with them in Asgard, the agreement was made during a time when Thor was out on one of his little hunting trips, out smashing trolls in Jotunheim again, like he did very frequently, because Thor was known for being smasher of trolls, smasher of the Jotun. He literally was known to have this temper and aggression towards them. He was known for literally, he would go on literal hunting trips. I'm sorry, he would. For the purpose of hunting down the Jotun. Never mind the fact that he's part Jotun too, but simply that was his thing, and he was so aggressive about it that in that tale, particularly about the builder and the wall around Asgard, was they made sure, all the gods in Asgard made sure that they had the builder there to work out their agreements on a day when Thor was out on that trip, because the Jotun were afraid to be around Asgard if Thor was there, because they were afraid he would do that to them. They were afraid to come to Asgard if they knew Thor was there. And even the other Asgardians knew this, to the point that if they were making that arrangement with this guy, then he would have to come on a day Thor was not there. They pointed that out in the lore. Now later, they want to act like they're all surprised that, oh, he's really strong, he must be a Jotun. Yeah, you knew that. You mentioned that when you made the agreement. So there's always this hatred and fear and even trickery toward the Jotun. So pretty much any of them can understand what it's like to be outcast and to be hated for simply how you were born. And that's one of the things that we can relate to, those of us who are outcast in any way. It doesn't matter if it's, your LGBT or minority race or minority religion. Whatever the case, those of us who feel outcast can relate in some way to the Jotun. They can relate to us. They've been there. Not only that, not only the builder, but again, the children. And like I said, they were kidnapped while they were still children from their mother's home. They went, they were sent, Thor and Tyr, and I can't remember one more, I'm sorry, brain fart. But so they go on this journey to steal the children, because they were feared. And they deliberately wait until Angrboda is out, gathering or whatever she's doing, and take the children from their home. And then they take them to Odin, where their fate is decided. And they ended up outcast or chained down or both. So Loki loves his children. And he helps fight in Ragnarok. It's almost like revenge. Like that final revenge. I've always said, to me, if you don't read the stories from the viewpoint of good versus evil, it's not actually what it says. And if you read it like a standard novel that you just picked up at a bookstore and you determine who's bad, who's good, and whatever, from that perspective, without the mindset of there's a good evil here, if you just read it as a whole, it's almost like the underdogs finally fought back at the end. The oppressors got took down, and then there was a whole restart. And if you notice, when that's all said and done, the ones that survive and take over literally sit down and have a conversation about how we are not going to make the same mistakes as our predecessors. So, from the aspect of lover of Outcast, Loki leads that fight. It's like that battle. That is, you can kind of view it as when you're out marching and protesting. It's kind of that theory of these guys are doing us wrong. They've done it over and over, and now we're standing up, and now, the old one comes down. The old government, the old rule is ending. Something new is going to begin. And Loki is a major part of that. So he is a fighter and an ally because he is one of us. He is outcast. And so are his children. And as a father, as a mother, he wants to look out for us the way he does his children. In Loki, he wasn't just an outcast because of his relation to the Jotun. Or shall we say, being Jotun isn't his only thing. He had the added aspect of being outcast even while in Asgard. Even though they let him stay around. They let him come in. They let him hang out. He had a wife that lived there. He had children that lived there. But he was blamed for almost everything that went wrong. It didn't matter what caused it. It's almost like he was the token Jotun of Asgard. There were other Jotun. Tyr, Skadi, etc. But they all had aligned with the Aesir to the point that, they were kind of like one of them. They gave in. They gave in and decided to be whatever they needed to be to keep their home there in Asgard. Loki remained Loki no matter what. But the thing was, they would blame him for anything that went wrong. Because it was him. Because he's Jotun. Because whatever. And so many people will tell us, when people talk about not following Loki, they will use these examples of, well, Loki did this, this, and this. And then if you read the lore, it actually doesn't say he did this. It says they assumed he did it. It literally says assumed. It says they all got together and talked about who must have done this. Oh, it must have been Loki. And that is just another form of being outcast. You're the scapegoat. That is what he is to them. They use him as a scapegoat. There were things that they caused that he went and fixed on his own. I mean, he knew they were going to send him anyway. He would still try to help them. He would volunteer to help. And yet still, everything was his fault. When the builder started having his little meltdown because he knew, even that story, they somehow blamed Loki. They came to the whole reason Loki was the one that was, sent out was because they're like, oh, he's getting too close to actually finishing his goal and finishing on time. So, someone must have set this up. Loki must have told him to come make this agreement. There's no evidence that's what happened. That's literally, the lore literally says they just assumed it was Loki. So again, pay attention to the wording. So that being the case, Loki knows what it's like to be an outcast. He knows what it's like to be the scapegoat. And so, therefore, he's here for us. One of the examples of volunteering that he even now does not get credit for is when Thor's hammer was stolen. And we have the whole story about, Thor's bride's dress, pretending to be Freya so he can come get his hammer. And everyone's like, well, that was all Loki's fault, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Again, it never said it was Loki's fault. Loki is the one that kind of went and found out where it was. And then the idea of getting put in the dress and dressing as a bride was not Loki's idea. A lot of people say it was Loki's idea to make it happen, and it wasn't. It was Heimdall that said, well, maybe Thor should dress up like, a bride and pretend to be Freya and get his hammer back. That was Heimdall. Loki then volunteered to dress as the handmaid to go and help in case he needed backup. Yeah. But still, both in the lore and now, he gets the blame for it somehow. And that was one case where the lore does not even blame him, but people now still do, because the interpretations have said that I'm sorry, apparently I've got a little friend in my loft. Ignore him. But anyway, so point being, the interpreters told us what to believe about it. And that's what we ran with. And there are people now who still will not read the lore or will not trust it, or who will tell you it means this because that's what they were told, not what it actually says. And you have to change your mindset before you read it, because again, that wasn't Loki. It did not say Loki actually did the thing wrong. In that particular case, flat out said it was Heimdall's idea to wear the dress. Loki volunteered to help. So again, Outcast. He's the Jotun of the bunch, so let's just blame it on him. So with him doing these things, not only volunteering to help, helping, whether it was his fault or not, he would help. They had issues with him because of the fact that he did hang out with the other Jotun at times. He didn't just stay in Asgard all day, every day. He would hang out with the other Jotun. He would hang out with the dwarves. Loki kind of hung out with everybody. So Loki didn't care. Like, you are you, I'm me, you're a dwarf. Okay, cool. You're a Jotun. So am I. And so one of the things about Loki is he did spend his time getting to know a little bit of every race or class of being. He spent time with humans. He spent time with the Jotun. He spent time with the dwarves. He spent time in Asgard. He was able to go and hang out and view and be a part of everyone. And that again goes along with, our lover of Outcast, our ally, our really, if you want an example of equality and diversity, that is Loki, not only as himself, but who all he went and hung out with. He didn't shun the others because they weren't what he was. So he wasn't really like a double agent. We say he was really more of a mediator. Again, things went wrong, and they would send him, accusing him of being it, or he would go on his own because of the fact that he knew the other groups well enough that he could go along and help out because he knew how they operated because he spent time with them. So he's kind of more of a mediator. Not really I'm fighting for you or them, but I'm kind of here because I can tell you how they operate, and I can tell them how you operate. So he tried to make a balance in that. And again, people don't like that for some reason. They cannot get it through their head that there is not necessarily good, bad, dark, light. Everything with Loki and really the Jotun as a whole is balance of both. And I think, in my personal view, that's a part of why um, that they were so hated. Not necessarily because Asgardians themselves don't do those things, but because Loki and the Jotun, they do it unashamedly. They don't try to hide it. They don't try to present themselves as one way. They are who they are. And I think in my personal UPG, and especially in the context of this topic, that is another part of why they were hated. Not only because they were different, but because they didn't care that they were different. They did not feel ashamed for the things that others did. It's kind of like, when you're younger in high school and, people pick on you for your clothes, and then later you find out it's just because they're jealous they didn't have the balls to do it themselves. It's that kind of thing of, I'm too scared to do it, so I'm going to make fun of you because you're so open about it. Or, the stories we have now in the news, how many people, totally bash the gay community and make laws against them, and then later you find out they're secretly gay too. It's kind of that whole hypocritical, I hate you because you have the balls to be you when I don't. And the Jotun got that a lot, especially Loki. So, because of that, Loki is one that we do see as the lover of the outcast. Jotun as a whole can be seen that way, but Loki's kind of, again, our connector point that connects the other realms to the Jotun so that we can really get a better picture of them. And because of these stories, and because of that, combined with UPG, combined with PCPG, shared UPG, we have so many minorities. They are people who are typically outcast that feel very welcomed by Loki, very loved by Loki, protected, safe, and he helps to slowly get that particular practitioner to a point where they can start to open up and be more of who they are. 6-7 years ago, you would never see my face online like this. Well, I'm uglier now than I was back then, so hey, but you know what? Loki likes me talking about him. So, here I am. So, because of this, we have, LGBTQ+, we have disabled people, we have the neurodivergent, there's support that we find in him, in Loki, and his stories that you don't really find with the others. Again, I do not ever say you don't follow the others. I'm just saying I do these things for Loki. I feel I have to remind people. It's not that I am against any of, let me reword that. It's not that I'm against following any of the Aesir or the Menhir or anyone for that matter. Follow a dwarf if you like. If you're a crafter, that would be a great thing for you, to be honest. Do what you do. I'm just saying we need to put some focus on the positive aspects of Loki and the Jotun and the Roker. Like, all of these so-called darker or bad deities and beings. We need to, I do this because there is a balance to it. And I want to put that out there so that other people later down the road won't have to deal with the same hatred that some of us did when we came to follow him. You know, to kind of bridge that gap. I want to be a bridge for, um, you know, I want to see the heathen community, the Norse pagan community as a whole, be able to unite against the haters. And just in general, we talk about Ken and Frit all the time, and yet a lot of people who carry the name of heathen or Norse pagan hate on each other simply because they follow a different one of the gods. And so I do this to make sure that people do get an example of that positive side, the parts we can use to grow, to help. That's what we're all about. There's no point in a spiritual path if you never grow. And so that's why I do this. I want to grow, help grow not only people as individuals, but like the whole path as a whole. I want us to grow to a point we can accept each other. And holy shit, that's why you wanted me to do it, isn't it? Now I know why this episode was important. Just a reminder of what I'm doing. Love you, Loki. But that is my thing. I want people to see this because there are those who feel outcast by the general mainstream heathen community. Especially, I'm going to say it, it's not my view, but there are those out there who use heathenry as a reason to hate LGBTQ+, to hate non-whites, or to even if it's not necessarily hate, it's you can't be a part of us. When it's totally, absolutely opposite of what we stand for, opposite of what the lore says, and absolutely total bullshit that some Nazi ass kisser created back in the fucking 30s and 40s. That is literally all that is. Again, do your homework. Read your history. So, back to the main point. It's important to see, as we look at the different aspects of Loki, that this side of him, and again, as Jotun as a whole, a lover of outcasts, an ally for the outcast, a protector for the outcast. So this is why, so many Lokians fight for equality and human rights and so many others, because it's part of who Loki is, it's part of who the Jotun are, it's part of who we are. And really, it's just the right thing to do. So we see in Loki, and we see in the others, the other Jotun as a whole, through Loki, we see that Loki is one who will stand up for the broken and the downtrodden and the outcast. He will stand up for them. He will comfort them. He will love them as they are. And that is really comforting to a lot of us who have not had that. And he doesn't just do that for us, but again, he helps to slowly but surely get that individual person to the point where their fucks are gone. They don't care. They are them. And they're happy with that. And Loki's happy with that. And he helps people through those times of self-loathing coming from others. I've been there. Well, I still go through it at times because, unfortunately, I am mostly human. And it is good to have a God that we know we can turn to, who will, he's not going to baby you. He will light a fire under your ass if needed. But he will help you have the strength and ability to get through those times, to see yourself as the good, strong person you are and can be. You know, the inner strength that a lot of times outside people tell us things. They tell us we're not worthy. They tell us we should hate ourselves. They tell us we're not good enough. And Loki says, yes, you are. Loki will put that little bug in your ear that says, I love you. You should love you. And at times, he'll get you downright cocky just to pull you out of your depressed state. So, that is why the aspect of Loki that is lover of Outcast is probably my favorite. Because, again, he's there for us and he helps us to be there for ourselves in the long run. Like a parent would. That's what parents do, right? Or spouses. We'll get to that another day. So, if you take anything from this, I know I might have rambled a little, but if you take anything from this episode, with the lover of Outcast, Aspect of Loki, let it be that Loki will accept us for who we are, what we are, and we should accept ourselves for that, like he does. And we accept others in the same way. So if you take anything, make it be that. Make it be. To accept yourself and others for who they are, what they are. Yeah, don't let them get, I don't mean who they are as in if they're a bad person, you have to put up with it. But when it comes to who they are as in how they're born. If you're gay, if you're, if you're black, Hispanic, white, I don't care. If you are gay, straight, cis, trans, I don't care. Love yourself. Love others. Embrace diversity in yourself and others. Because that's what Loki does. So, that's all for this episode. Hope you all have a great night. In the meantime, hail Loki. Hail the lover of Outcast. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.